Welcome to the Church Brand Guide podcast. My name is Michael Persad. In our episode today, we want to help you to communicate really well through announcements. Announcements are a great tool that you can use at your church to help people take their next steps. We want to help you get that right. In fact, today we have a guest, Joshua Riggs, who is with us, and he's going to share tactics for helping you to do this really well. It's important that people are able to understand what you offer as a ministry, as a church, to help them. And so you have to be really good at this, really good at communicating the benefits of the church and great brands. That's what great brands do well. So in the marketplace, brands that communicate the value they offer are the brands that are successful and that sell a lot of products or sell a lot of services. Well, what if we can learn some of these techniques in church world to then offer to people that need it, like the gospel and everything that surrounds that. So your church probably offers a lot of things from financial help to discipleship and kids program, youth program, all these different things. So we need to be able to communicate this really well. And this episode is designed to help you do that through announcements. The Church Brand Guide podcast itself is designed to help you if you're in communications at your church. Maybe you're a pastor that wears all the hats. We want to help you out. And maybe you're a volunteer that just got asked to help with social media, but now you're doing that communications. We want to help you get this right. If you're on staff and maybe you do graphic design or maybe you're producing videos, this podcast is designed to help you level up your game so that you can do this at a very high level because what you do really matters. In fact, we want to help you see more people come to your church. The result of that is more life change taking place. And we want to also help you to get more people to contribute to the vision that God has given you. It takes intentionality. It takes some great tactics. And this podcast is designed to help you do that. Go to churchbrandguide.com if you haven't checked that out. We have some great resources. In fact, there's a great resource to download. It's for free to help you learn what a brand looks like for a church. It kind of walks you through there's basically 5 big areas where a brand is necessary for a church, and we want to help you understand what that is so you can lock that in, get it done really well at your church. So check out that resource at churchbrandguide.com. Let's jump into today's episode with Joshua Riggs, and let's unpack announcements at your church. Welcome to our episode today. We are with Joshua Riggs once again, and we're talking about announcements and like hosting at the church. It's one of those big topics that can become kind of a stepchild of the church experience on the weekends. So we want to help you to get this right. We want to give you some tips and some advice and some inspiration to make this a great experience at your church every single week. Hey, Joshua, welcome back.
Hey, Michael, thanks so much for part 2, and look forward to chatting about announcements, the least the part of the service that people spend the least amount of time on, but often takes more time than other things in the service.
That is a great title. I should write that. It'd be really long, but it'd be a great title.
I mean, it's true. I mean, it's like who was it? Was it that said, if I had more time, my sermon would have been shorter. Like the more time you have to spend something, the more you can hone it in and really make it good. If you don't spend any time on it, then it's going to end up being extra long. So
yeah. So in part 1, we talked about the kind of the overarching strategy. Like here's kind of what you need to think about as you're preparing for this stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm excited about this one because we're going to get into more tactics of like, here's how you do it really well. Before we jump in, though, why don't we take a moment just to get to know you a little bit better so the audience can get to know you a little bit better. One of the cool things we were just talking about before we started recording was that you were a foster parent and then you adopted. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I'm married to Allison. We've been married for 19 years and we have 5 children, 4 biological and 1 adopted. Her name is Mary. She's 4 now. We got her when she was 10 days old. We started fostering just before the summer of 2020 is sort of when we got approved in the middle of the summer, and then we had a placement, and then we got Mary when she was 10 days old, picked her up from the hospital, and by God's grace, she's been a part of our family ever since. We finalized her adoption in the spring, 2018 is when we started, and 2020 is when we finalized her adoption. So there was something that good that came out of 2020, at least for our family, and that was making Mary part of us. So yeah,
Yeah.
she's
Wow.
awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's so cool. So
yeah,
cool. And
she's
five
so much
kids.
fun.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she is. I could tell you story after story. I won't waste your time today, but so many stories of funny things that she has done. So anyway, so I also am the worship pastor at Bethany Church in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, a little south of Tulsa. And then I'm the creator of worshipresources.church, where, a lot of churches, they struggle to find and know how to use the best resources in their church. They know they want to improve, they want to get better, they just don't know how to use where the resources are or even how to use them. And so I provide training for teams, volunteers, and staffs to help their church use the best resources around to their fullest potential so their church can get better. So I'd love for you to connect with you over at worshipresources.church. And
Yeah.
if I can help you in any way, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. Be sure to check that out. It's a great resource that Josh has put together. So we are jumping into announcements. We both have roles at our church where we do announcements at the church. We host, or another way to say it is that we host the services. Josh has some great insights on like how to systematically do this. Before we get into some of the tactics, what is the overall goal when it comes to announcements?
I would say the overall goal is to communicate to the church what you're doing as a church, and then how that ties into your mission. Like, so everything that you communicate, it's not just what, but it's why as well. What are you doing? We're going on to do this homeless outreach, but you also want to communicate the why and somehow tie it to the mission or the vision of your church, um, to share God's love, to reach more people, to spread the gospel, whatever it is, tie it to that mission and vision.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think that's great to really one of the things I try to do when I'm doing announcements too is to help unpack the church in a small way. Like you don't have a lot of time, so you can't go crazy with it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the announcements, like just unpacking the DNA of the church. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
we're doing this thing coming up. That's what we do around here.
Mm-hmm.
Different things that help to unpack the DNA of what the church is. So if somebody's new, they're looking for a church they want to belong to, or they're new to church in general, like we just want to help them understand what a church is,
Yeah.
so they can make a decision to say, man, I should probably stick around and check this out.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes, yeah, go ahead.
This is who we are. It's not just what we're doing, but this is who we are.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. So what are some tips if you're doing announcements, or if you're in charge of announcements at your church? What are some like 101 basic tips that people need to know of how to approach announcements?
So a couple of things. First off, we talked about this in the previous episode, but try to communicate through the lens of a first-time guest. Everything that you say, you need to communicate it as though they've never been to your church, they've never been to any church. Can they understand what you're saying? So some tips are, don't use acronyms. Don't say our ABFs are going to meet in the FLC, after the service. Like, nobody knows what that means. By the way, that means Adult Bible Fellowship meet in the Family Life Center. Like, just say what you want to say. Use clear language. Don't try to be clever. Like, clear beats clever every time. Just speak very clearly, where a second grader can understand what you're saying. That I think that's, if churches could just do that, they would be, 80 or 90%, on the way there. So that's one thing. I would say also write out, if especially if you're new to hosting or you're training someone, get them to write out what they're going to say, script it out, and then share that with somebody else on staff or somebody else that you trust, maybe your spouse or something like that, and get their feedback. And that way you can see what's not clear, Where am I spending too much time? Where do I need to spend more time? Those types of things. There's just a lot of clarity when you actually write something out. And it's not that you have to have it memorized. I don't think you should memorize it word for word, but you should have sort of a roadmap from your start to finish, a framework, so that you can make sure you're communicating clearly the entire time you're up there. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I know you're going to talk about this here in a second, but writing it out has been huge. Like, as I've been doing it, it's amazing how it really puts my thoughts down. Like,
Mhm,
I think I know what I'm going to say, but when I
mhm,
write it down, it just
mhm.
makes it concrete,
Yeah.
to where I can get through the announcements and I don't feel like I'm flowing. Like, it feels
Mhm,
more natural, I guess, in
mhm,
a way, which is
mhm,
counter what you would think. You would think if you write it down, you're going to be robotic and
mhm,
memorize it, but it actually really helps you to process your thoughts.
mhm,
And I know you're going to mention this one coming up, but like watching yourself off of a recording, like either
mhm.
recording or I guess what's your tips on being able to kind of watch yourself do the announcements?
Yeah, so I mean, if it's your first time or you're new to it, just record yourself on your phone, like practice at home, set your phone up, record yourself, and then go back and watch it. It's brutal. It's hard to watch yourself, right? Or listen to yourself. But go back and then just be honest with yourself, evaluate how did you do, and then you're gonna know how you're coming across, and if you're communicating clearly or not. So,
Yeah,
and
I
then
have
and
some.
then show it
Yeah,
to somebody, show that video and ask them, "Hey, what do you think about this? What is being communicated? Where do I need to improve?" So,
I love the showing it to somebody, but yeah, you're right. It is brutal, but I've caught myself. I've improved so much because of that.
yeah.
I used to be a little jittery and kind
Mhm,
of shifty on
mhm.
stage, and I would say too much, those type of things. So
Yeah,
by recording yourself, man, you can improve very quickly.
yeah, yeah, recording yourself, being willing to watch because you probably have some sort of, like, nervous tick or something, like, I have a friend who, he will like, when he's nervous, he'll reach up and scratch his head like this while he's talking, and he doesn't realize he's doing it, but if you watch yourself, you're gonna realize those weird things that you do that you're not realizing.
Awesome. So what are we trying to communicate when we're doing announcements? Like, are we trying to communicate the why? We talked on this last time, but
Mhm,
just to kind of reset on it, like
mhm.
how we have to communicate a lot of information,
Yeah,
that we're trying to get across, but
yeah.
what's the approach?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to tying it back to the mission of your church. This is the what, but this is also the why. This is how it's going to make an impact, not just the homeless outreach, but this is the impact that it's going to make. This is why we're doing it. I think, tying as much as you can, refer back to your values, your core values, your mission as a church, use those announcements. Otherwise, it's just going to feel like you said, like a stepchild, like it's just this thing we have to do. We have to communicate these things. But if you can um, get real clarity on why this activity or this event or this ministry, why we're doing it, how it affects, the church as a whole, and then communicate those things, I think that's a huge step forward.
Yeah, I love the idea of asking, putting yourself in the seat and then asking yourself, why should I care? Like, if I'm
Hmm.
sitting in the seat and
Hmm.
somebody's
Yeah,
announcing
that's good.
something and you're saying, hey, you're sitting there, so why should I care about this again? And it's
Right.
not like an arrogant why should I care? It's more of
Mhm.
like, how can I help that person understand,
Mhm.
why they should care about this thing that we're announcing right now?
Yeah.
And so you're just trying to serve people basically
Yeah.
with
Yeah, that's
with
good.
that.
Yeah.
So as far as some tactics, how do we help the information to stick?
So there are some announcements that you just have to make. They're just boring. I would say get those out of the way first. Like if it's, a business meeting or something that just is hard to really inspire people through, communicate those, just be quick, be clear, just communicate it and move on. If it's something that's it can be tied back to the mission, use a story to to illustrate the point. When you tell a story, people engage. They engage like they don't lose focus. They're not distracted. When you tell a story, they pay attention to the whole thing. And so, as an example, this past week, we've been doing a push for the last several weeks to get kids ministry volunteers. And so I told a story about when I was 8 years old. I remember our children's church director. He was the kindest, most compassionate man, and he taught our kids' church classes for about I think I had him for maybe 2 or 3 years, and um, I honestly don't remember any like lessons or anything that he taught, but I know how he made me feel, and I know that he told me about Jesus and he cared about me as a person. Well, by God's grace, the Lord has allowed both of us to live in Tulsa now, and I reconnected with him a few years ago, and about once a month or so, we'll go to lunch together, and I'm able to now, instead of him doing the ministering, I'm able to minister to him and care for him as an older man. And so I told that story, and then I showed a picture of me and Mr. Olson, that's his name, and showed a picture of him. He's in his 80s now, and said, the same impact that he had on my life, you have the opportunity to have a similar impact to the kids in our kids ministry. And so we encourage you to sign up, to volunteer, and help us teach your kids about Jesus. So that was the story, I tied the story into the ask of asking them to step up and volunteer.
Wow, that's good. So I think the question that a lot of people might have is how much time should the announcements take? So if you're talking about a story or you're announcing maybe a few different things, how much time should you allot for announcements?
I mean, at least as long as the sermon. You should spend as much time on the announcements as the sermon, right? No, I'm kidding. So I had the opportunity to evaluate several churches. I think it was maybe 10 or 12 churches this past year. And almost without exception, their announcement segment, like on the low end, was 8 minutes, somewhere between 8 and 15 minutes long for basically every church. And I'll just tell you, you need to go back and listen to the first episode and narrow down those announcements, because you're spending way too much time on your announcements. You should target 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, between 3 and 5. That should be your target for your announcement time, because again, you want to focus on the most important things. You're looking at it through the lens of a first-time guest, and the things that are communicating to a majority of the audience, that's the things you want to communicate. So 3 to 5 minutes, I think, is plenty of time. Again, if you write it out, you'll be able to hone it down, get it really clear, as opposed to just getting up there rambling and kind of flying off the cuff. Get it down to that 3 to 5 minute range, and your audience will thank you for it.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think it's an aha moment for people. Some people listening, you think you need to spend a lot of words so people will take action, but actually the less you say, the more people will take action.
Yeah.
So how many announcements do you think we should be doing in the service?
So the amount of announcements. So for us, we always do the welcome, like a welcome to guests, those watching online, introduction. I sort of group that all as one announcement, one part. And then we try to stick to 3 or less major announcements. So we take all the ministries of the church and we decide what is the most important based on what is coming up, the closest, as well as what's going to impact the most amount of people. And we try to stick to those 3 announcements. And then we have the offering. We tie in the offering and prayer as kind of the wrap up to the host segment. So 3 is enough. 2 is great. 1 is awesome. I mean, think of it. If you can spend, you say one thing that you want your audience to do, your congregation to do, and you tie it around a story, or maybe I should say tie a story around that announcement, it's going to have so much more impact than having 5 or 10 or 15 different things that you're trying to communicate.
Wow. Yeah, I think another aha moment. I think there's a lot of churches out there that are used to doing about 8 or 12 announcements.
Yeah.
That's really good. All right. So just a side note on that. So if you're doing 3 announcements, let's say maximum of 3, where else can people then find out information? Just some quick
Yeah.
thoughts.
So I mean, that's the thing. You can't think that your verbal announcements are everything. Like everybody's that's the only way you're communicating. You have several other ways that you can communicate. And so that's why something that is important and you want people to know about doesn't necessarily need to have a verbal announcement from the stage, because you can email it to your congregation. You should be using email, by the way. You can post it on your website. You should do that as well. You can post it on social media channels. You can get creative and do like just announcements that show up on Instagram stories or something like that. So there are plenty of other ways to communicate to your church other than just a verbal announcement.
Yeah, I think we've all had the experience of somebody coming up and asking to do announcements from the stage, because I think that's the only way to get the message out there. So go back to episode or part 1 of this topic here, the last episode, and we go into a little bit more detail of how do you say no to some people that want their announcements from the stage. So where in the service should the announcements be placed?
So I think you mean like at the beginning of the service, at the end of the service, or in the middle somewhere. I mean, really, that's kind of the options. There are pros and cons to both. If you do it at the beginning, there's going to be people who show up late and they're not going to hear it. If you do it at the end, people have already checked out. If you do it in the middle, people feel like it sort of is a disruption from the time of worship, music into the sermon. So I get it. There are pros and cons to every place to have the announcements. I would say just figure out what works in your context and then make it work, but make it so it's not just this add-on to the service, but it's actually a part of the service where you're tying back to your mission and vision, and you're trying to incorporate it all together into one cohesive experience. We do the announcements in the middle, so we typically do worship at the front, and then announcements, offering, and then some sort of a sermon video transition, and then into the message and the response. That's our typical service flow. That seems to work well for us. I don't like the let's do one song and then let's do some announcements and then let's go back and do some more songs. So as a worship pastor, like the music worships part of the service is very important to me, obviously, and uh, it takes a long time of continuous worship from most people to get to the point where they fully surrender their heart and their mind to the Lord. And so if you're breaking that time up where you're worshiping God through music, if you break that up with announcements, in my opinion, that breaks the flow significantly and causes a much more disjointed service. So I would say keep it away from the worship. Either do it at the beginning or at the end of the worship, but don't do it in the middle of it. And then we use it, like I said, we tie it to our mission, but we use those announcements sort of as a transition, so the band has plenty of time to get off the stage. We're communicating the announcements, and then we're reset the stage for the pastor.
Yeah, we kind of went through a few different ways of doing the announcements till we've kind of settled on something for now, but I think like it might change. But we do it also after the worship is over. It's a transition moment. The way we do it is whoever the host is will kind of pray out of the worship experience, and then from there tell people to have a seat. They'll greet the online audience, and then they'll go into welcome to first-time guests and announcements, and then into the we have a bumper video before the sermon. So that's kind of our flow that we think works pretty well right now.
Yeah.
We used to do it at the end of service, and I've been at church services before where it's at the end, and it feels like it's a hurry up moment. Like,
right.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we're done now. Wait a minute. There's another announcement. There's another one. So the person on stage kind of feels like that, so they kind of talk really fast,
Right.
and the people in the seat are like, okay, can we go now?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
now
The
it's
end
not
is hard
always,
because you feel like you're
yeah.
making excuses. No, I just have one more, just one more, like you're trying to get them to hold on. Whereas in the middle, like they're sort of stuck there, right?
Right. So it feels right. Now I've seen
Yeah.
some churches do it well at the end of
Hmm.
service. So it,
Hmm.
it can be done well. I
Hmm.
just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
What we've also done too, like as of late, is that Pastor Brandon will just at the very, very end, like hit on one or two major thing, like, or the
Hmm.
next thing that's coming up. Just a quick
Hmm.
reminder, hey, make sure you do this,
Hmm.
and then hey, we'll see you next week.
Hmm.
So that's just
I
something
th-
we've found works lately.
I think that's good for the senior pastor. Just be if you're going to have the senior pastor make announcements, you should be really intentional about what announcements he does, because his voice is going to carry the most weight in the church. And so if he's announcing something that's not significant, what that does is that actually lessens the value of his voice for the things when he does communicate something important. So if you want him to communicate something, save the best for him, so to speak. And you can also encourage him, if he's this type of preacher, like if he's preaching on community and you want people to be involved in small groups, have him weave that announcement to join a small group into the sermon, so it doesn't feel like an announcement, but it actually is communicating an announcement. That those are my two suggestions when using a pastor. Be selective on what he does and does not announce, and then also ask him to sort of incorporate the applicable announcements into the sermon material.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So let's talk about another tactic, the call to action.
Mhm.
So this can look differently. There's different ways to do the call to action. So let's unpack what does that look like for people to actually take action to do the thing you're announcing.
Mhm. So the very first thing is you should have a call to action, right? Don't just announce it and then don't tell them what to do. People do what you tell them to do for the most part. So you've got to tell them what you want them to do. You communicate something and then say, okay, now what? Like, now that I've told you this, this is what I want you to do. The same is true on your website. Like, you need a clear call to action that you want people to do, the step that you want people to take. And so for us, we decided several years ago we were just going to have one call to action for everything. And for us, it's a simple landing page, and it's Bethany.info. So we purchased the domain name Bethany.info, and so after every single announcement, we say, if you want to find out more, you want to sign up, whatever it is, go to Bethany.info. So if you want to give online, go to Bethany.info. If you want to follow along with the sermon notes, go to Bethany.info. If you want to sign up for VBS, go to Bethany.info. It's the same call to action every single time. So it's not what happens is you confuse your audience when you give them multiple steps that you want them to take. And so if you say, let's say you give an announcement and then you say, come to the front of the service and meet Sister so and so after the service if you want to be a part of this. And then you give another announcement and you say, go to the lobby and sign a clipboard and sign up using one of the clipboards if you want to be a part of that. And then you give another announcement and you say, you can talk to Pastor so and so. That's the worst one. Like, you should never say talk to Pastor so and so if for your announcement, because you're thinking through the lens of a first time guest. The first time guest doesn't know who the youth pastor is, right? He hasn't been on stage yet. He doesn't know how to communicate to him. So you should the call to action should never be talk to the pastor. In my opinion, it's one call to action, and for us, it's instead of, you could use an app, but we wanted to reduce all barriers, and so it's just Bethany.info, and that is a simple landing page. We use Planning Center Services as our church management software. And so, by the way, a shameless plug, I help churches with Planning Center. If you need help with Planning Center, I'd love to help you. But um, we use Planning Center, and they have the Church Center app and the web-based version of Church Center. and it's the same content, but it shows up in an app form on an iOS or Android, and it also shows up in a browser form. And so Bethany.info is a simple landing page where they can download the app or they can visit the browser version of our Church Center account. And so, and on that page, we have all of our next steps, join a group, give online, sign up for an event. If they want to watch a past message, like whatever they want to do, whatever next step we are asking them to take, they can find out the details at Bethany.info. So we use that one call to action for everything. It simplifies it for us and simplifies it for the church. They know if I want to find out more, I got to go to Bethany.info to take my next step.
Any thoughts with a QR code? Like, is it worth having a QR code that goes to Bethany.info, or any thoughts on that?
So I think QR codes, COVID caused those to be really popular. There was a point where I thought they would just totally die because they just weren't taking off. And then they sort of have rejuvenated life now. I think if you use them, you shouldn't use them for multiple different things. Like, they don't say scan this QR code to go here, scan this QR code to go here. Like, if you're going to use one, just have one thing that it does. In my opinion, it should be a connection card. So you've probably seen churches that will have stickers on the backs of their chairs that have the QR code to say, connect with us today. I think that's a great use. It should just be used really intentionally. If you're going to use a QR code, use it really intentionally for them to take their next step.
Awesome. So basically, it's one page. You're saying that Bethany.info would be just a page with everything that somebody would need. So all they need to know is that one bit of information, Bethany.info, and then they can go from there.
Yeah.
So with
I'll just mention it's mobile friend. It's mobile first, because they're visiting it on their phone. That's 90% of them they're not gonna visit it when they get home. They're gonna see it on their phone. So we try to make it as mobile friendly as possible so that they can click and access what they need to right from their phone.
Okay, so just a couple quick thoughts. We at our church we used a text system, so it's a text Vibrant to 94,000, but it does the same thing. It basically pops up a menu on your phone. So we're leveraging the phone as well. Same thing, like if you give, it's this number. If you want to sign up, it's this number. If you want to do whatever events coming up, it's another number. So it's kind of a link tree of different things that you can have access to, and just by texting the number. So then that becomes our call to action.
So let me ask you a question. Does the number changes based on the call to action?
No, we just said we used to do that, but yeah, it's too confusing. So it's just one number for everything.
Does the keyword change?
No, it can, but as of right now, like we used to do text, I don't know, Jesus to this number, text Vibrant to this number, but now it's just we just do Vibrant to the number, and that's it for everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to go. I mean, if you again, it goes back to you're trying not to confuse the audience, and if you have multiple calls to action, they're gonna get confused, and it's gonna cause them to not take action, and that's what you don't want. You want them to take their next step. So I think if you choose a mobile friendly site or a text, just pick one of those and just stick with it. Like, if you want to find out more, text 9400 or whatever it is, 94,000, text Jesus to 94,000 and go from there. So, which, by the way, I think you should use Jesus instead of Vibrant, but anyway.
Okay, well, I'll bring it up at our next
that's right,
directors meeting, and I'll have you on the call, and we'll just FaceTime you in, and
that actually might be more confusing though for first time guest. Like, what am I texting Jesus for?
Right. Yeah, the answer is always Jesus in church.
Yeah.
So
yes.
There you go. But hopefully that so one of the things we do too, we do have a physical Connect card that we hand out to people. We found that some people just like Connect cards, so we might throw a QR code on that. And like you said, I've worked with different churches, and some of them might use a QR code on the back of their seats, or on the announcement slides or flipping up on the screens, they might put a QR code on the side. But I think that's a little bit harder because you got to put your phone up there and try to capture it.
Right.
So the seat back's probably the better the better option.
Right. Yeah.
Any final thoughts on this? We talked a lot about tactics today. Any final thoughts you want to hit on before we close it out?
I would say the most important thing is what we talked about near the top is be clear. Don't try to be clever. Just be clear. And I'll tell you a really quick story to illustrate this. I was at a conference at Church on the Move. This has been probably a decade ago. And they went through some of the similar thing, like trying to decide what their call to action was going to be and how to communicate clearly. And they had a room in their lobby, they still do, that they wanted to call the source. And so they would say, if you want to buy merchandise, go to the source. If you want to sign up for a group, go to the source. And it was very clever. They thought it was and it was very clever. But they found themselves saying, go to the source. It's the big red room in the lobby. And in their lobby, they have this red, it's the facade of the room is red and you can't miss it. Like they wanted it to stand out. But every time they would say, go to the source, they would also say, go to the red room. And then they said, why are we wasting our time and are, trying and confusing people by using this clever name, the source? Why don't we just say, go to the red room? And so that's what they did. They simplified it, clarified it. And so then their call to action every time was, you want to sign up for a small group, you want to volunteer to serve, whatever it is, just go to the red room in the lobby. And that was their call to action. So I would say, think through what you're communicating and then ask. And a tip that you can use, and this is true for any communication, if you have to explain what you just said, then you didn't say it clear enough. So make sure you say exactly what you're trying to say. Don't use acronyms. Don't use insider language. Just be clear in what you're saying and simplify it down and say exactly what you mean without trying to be clever. And you will be, your announcement segment and your communication will improve drastically, I promise.
We might have been at the same conference at Church on the Move. I used to go down there. We used to be in Kansas City until about 3 years ago. So we drive down to Tulsa, and man, Church on the Move, the resources, we always enjoyed everything they put out. So
yeah,
I might have met you at one of those conferences in the after party or something.
Yeah.
That's so good. I know the red room you're talking about too. Like those guys do a good job of just making adjustments and then sharing it with the rest of the church world. So that's really great. Well, hey, thank you, Joshua, for coming on and sharing all these insights when it comes to announcements. I know there's a lot of churches that struggle with this. A lot of communications people that listen to this podcast are in charge of this. And we just hope you get better as a result of our tips from today. Hey, Joshua, what's the best way for somebody to get hold of you if they wanted to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to worshipresources.church and all my social handles are there on that website. Or if you want to send me an email, it's just joshua@worshipresources.church.
Excellent. I want to encourage you to check out Joshua and all the great resources he's offering through his platform. So he's been great, and we have great conversations. He's pointed me in the right direction many times. So check out his stuff for sure. Hey, thanks again for joining us on this episode, and thanks again, Joshua, for unpacking your knowledge on us.
Thanks. God bless you guys.
Thanks for joining us on this episode. I hope that you are able to see more people taking next steps because you're able to do announcements better at your church. The Church Brand Guide is a great resource. We want to help you with new podcast episodes. If you have not subscribed, go ahead and do that on YouTube or on your favorite podcast player so you're notified when the next episode comes out. We have some great resources for you as well on churchbrandguide.com. In fact, if you need to go through a rebrand, we would love to walk you through that process. You can contact us through the website. There's a church we're working with right now in Lansing, Michigan, that's going through the rebranding process. Everything from a new logo, website, signage on the property, collateral materials throughout the facility and in the building, and even their online platforms. We are just rebranding all of that to be a more multi-generational church. This church has been around for quite a while, and they wanted to make sure that they are inviting the younger generation to come and be a part of the church and receive all the benefits of being part of this church. And so we're rebranding into a better setup, both online and also in person, so that those people feel like they are welcomed at the church, and we have a multi-generational church that's healthy and strong moving forward. So if you're looking for a new brand, a refresh of what's going on at your church, go to churchbrandguide.com, schedule a time. I'll get on a phone call with you. We could talk about our process. I can tell you a little bit more about some packages that we have so you can budget and kind of figure out what that looks like for your church. But I guess the beginning part of that is just reaching out to us by scheduling a call. So, hey, thanks again for joining us on this episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next episode.